and sealed.
Consoles weren't always a natural home for first-person shooters, but 2001 brought with it some big changes that completely eliminated the established narrative. One FPS that year was made for console and featured a bloke in a spacesuity thing shooting shotguns and precision rifles and rocket launchers at countless enemies in an alien environment. This particular game launched on the PlayStation 2 in May of 2001. It was called Red Faction from developer Volition, and it beat Halo Combat Evolved to market by 6 whole months. These days, Red Faction is a bit lost in the mix. Not utterly forgotten, but certainly not celebrated or even remembered with quiet fondness as much as I would have expected. Volition's adventure in gunning down corpo goons on the PS2 rendered Red Planet did indeed release well ahead of the Xbox's genre-defining Master Chief's big day out, but being first doesn't count for much. So Red Faction not being mentioned in the same breath as Halo, except to say, hey, did you know Red Faction came out 6 months before Halo, isn't a surprise. They're not in the same league. But that doesn't mean Red Faction should be ignored or forgotten. It was a great game in 2001. It raised the bar for FPSs on the PS2 and consoles in general, and after replaying it for this video, I'm genuinely surprised to report that it actually holds up now 25 years later. That is, at least when playing Alpine Faction on PC, because the original PS2 game... Look, sorry, I just couldn't be bothered with it today. Let's get it off our screens. I love you PS2 version, but you're not the one right now. There we go. So what the hell was this nonsense? The PS2 didn't have Half-Life, it didn't have Deus Ex, it didn't have No One Lives Forever. Sure, yes, it did get all of them eventually, but by early 2001, Sony's console only had a smattering of FPSs that did some things well, like Time Splitters or Unreal Tournament, but no truly defining full experience in the genre. And if Volition had carried on how it started, that fact would have remained. Red Faction started out life as Descent 4, a sequel in the 360 Degrees of Motion Sickness spaceship shooter series. I couldn't think of where to introduce this information, so I'll seamlessly integrate it now. A bunch of the information in this video comes from first-hand sources, members of staff from Volition who worked across the entire series of mainline Red Faction games, in numerous roles and from bottom to top in seniority. It's drawn from a feature in the UK magazine Play, issue 211, released in 2011. It was very handy I was able to find this feature because it's a bit of a goldmine of anecdotes about the series as a whole, so I want to send my thanks to whoever it was who wrote this those 15 years ago. Oh wait, it was me. I wrote it. Funny that. And yes, I'm linking a PDF to the original feature below. Anyway, like I was saying, Red Faction was originally going to be Descent 4, and that ended up being a key factor in a couple of key factors of the finished game. First up was the mines. Descent 4 would have you scooting your vomit comet through the tunnels of otherworldly mining facilities because that's a setting that makes sense for the type of game it was meant to be. And so it became you play as Parker, a miner thrust into the role of revolutionary figurehead after he witnesses a fellow rock scratcher being murdered in cold blood by Ultor's security forces. A fair portion of the game takes place inside the mines as a result. Second, destruction. In Descent 4 you would have been scooting around those subterranean bolt holes while also blowing your own additional holes, bolt or otherwise, as you saw fit. Again, an element that would make sense for the type of game it was going to be. And so that became the impressive, but also, come on now, it's 25 years old and even back then it was made for PS2, Geo-Mod tech that allowed for significant environmental destruction throughout the game's levels. It was the decision to allow you to leave the ship in this early version of Descent 4 that made the biggest impact though. Volition staffers found that walking about outside of your laser-adorned atmosphere was actually more fun than the core Descent-y bit of the game that they were making. As such, focus started veering towards the FPS-shaped bits of the game, and those Red Faction-shaped building blocks started to be plopped on top of each other. Did I say that made the biggest impact? Well, either I lied or I was wrong. Pick one. The biggest impact on the whole Descent 4 to Red Faction timeline was Volition leaving publisher Interplay and losing the Descent license. Meaning they literally weren't allowed to make Descent 4 anymore, at least not in name. So losing the license led to a hard decision. Work was scrapped and development started anew on something the devs had sort of been working on already, but not formally. And Red Faction, as we came to know it, was born. The Faceless Corporation, eventually named Ultor for the finished game, was another beat from Descent carried over, as was the secondary story of the plague spreading through the miners, but it wasn't Descent. It was something entirely new. Something where, originally, you played as a 12-year-old with a headband. Until someone smart decided that would be a terrible thing to do and it was dropped. Ultimately, Volition changed course from underground spaceships to underground envirosuits, and we ended up with Red Faction, an FPS developed for the PS2, bringing together the disparate elements other shooters had already done well on Sony's console, or elsewhere: multiplayer, a solid story-led campaign, some advanced tech and ideas backing it all up, and packaged it neatly together in a tale of the unstoppable power of the people rising up as one to fight oppression from faceless, jackbooted thugs and drones. The revolution had arrived. Wait, I shouldn't say that, it's a good title for the next section. As is my wont, I'll throw in another digression I couldn't think to put anywhere else. I'm aware of the silliness here and throughout this video that I have talked and will continue to talk so much about the PS2 and largely refer to Red Faction as a PS2 game, all while backed by footage of me playing a modernised PC version. But it is an important part of Red Faction's identity. This was a PS2 first game, and though it was ported to PC a few months after its initial release, it was on PlayStation where the game had actual impact. It didn't have that same impact on PC because PCs by 2001 had already seen Half-Life, Duke Nukem 3D, a trilogy of Quakes, No One Lives Forever, Deus Ex, Sin, Soldier of Fortune, Blood, Jedi Knight Dark Forces 2, Outlaws, Shogo Mobile Armor Division, Aliens vs Predator, Doom, Unreal, Unreal Tournament, Skynet, Star Trek Voyager Elite Force, Redneck Rampage, System Shock 2... Yeah, none of them had the environmental destruction like Red Faction, but given that element of Volition's game ended up as neutered as it did, spoiler, it wasn't exactly the X factor we might have expected it to be. Point being, on PC Red Faction was beloved for its multiplayer by the not giant number of people who played it, but the game was otherwise drowned out by the absolute flood of absolute FPS bangers available on Windows machines. Whereas Red Faction on PS2, and for that console-playing audience, was genuinely great and new and special. Eye of the beholder, innit? Not the Amiga game, I mean, the concept. Red Faction was a game. It's a solid start in describing it, you have to admit. A first-person shooter, set on Mars, miners, Ultor Corporation, the ever-underrepresented storyline of class struggle playing out in front of our eyes. Volition's shooter was very much of the Half-Life offshoot brand. Basic white dude in an environment suit picking up a small army's worth of guns and explosives, all with secondary fire modes, we shouldn't forget, mowing down legions of much better trained enemies in the fashion one could only describe as, well, that's realistic. Not that I'd do that, that's my least favourite form of criticism. And Red Faction did all this really quite well, rarely rising to the level of genuinely special and certainly not unique. The action was nonetheless engaging, with a good pace to everything. Just as you started to really tire of your current environment, it would throw in something new. You're no longer traipsing through Mars's underground caverns, instead thrown into an Ultor office-based stealth mission. You've been pootling around on your feet for quite a while, time for a bit of Descent, a space fighter thingy section. Or what about a submarine? Tank? Yeah, it mixed it up. Now, it's fair to say the action boiled down to the same fundamental set of actions. Shoot the people in front of you, and behind you and above you, maybe find a switch to throw or a key to unlock a door, listen to the disembodied voices in your head guiding you along. So while certainly a freshness and variety in the moment-to-moment action, Red Faction ultimately didn't do anything, revolutionary with its overall structure. But when you looked at the PS2's lineup in early 2001, an FPS doing pretty much anything decently well was welcome, and Red Faction did things, in the most part, far better than decently well. All of a sudden, owners of Sony's DVD and Fantavision player had something that felt important and felt like a complete game. I'm sorry, Time Splitters the First, I am looking at you. And it felt like it was made specifically with the PS2 in mind. Would Red Faction actually be noted as one of the console's most important bar-raising games today had it not released so close to the likes of Final Fantasy X and Grand Theft Auto 3 on PS2 or Halo Combat Evolved on Xbox? I don't know, I'm not psychic or a Van Damme-style time cop, but Volition's game of bashing the space fash had to have suffered a fate similar to that it saw on PC, washed away in a sea of titles that were just that much better, that much more polished, and that much more able to keep the whole thing together without losing focus as much as Red Faction definitely does as it progresses. It's a bit of a digression there, but I am talking about the game and what it was like to play in this bit, so it's actually bang on topic. What, first time for everything. It was a fun game, and honestly, I don't know if intentional or not, but it was Volition, so I'll go with a yes. A surprisingly funny game at times. Parker was a moron, it's clear to see.
We gotta keep moving. Shut up, Weasel. If Eos didn't want you, you'd be dead by now. I'll decide when it's time to go. Okay, let's go. To hell with orders! Die, K-Pack!
Congratulations, Parker. You were the first to see my nanotech shield in action. Now I must return to my work. Enjoy what little time you have left, you and your friends.
The personality, the sense of place, and the fun to be had all carried Red Faction well enough. But there was that other bit I've not gone into here. How on earth, how on Mars can I talk so much about actually playing Red Faction and not go into any specifics about its USP, its key element, the thing it was marketed to Jupiter and back with? Well, because I put it in its own section of the video instead. The Geo-Mod system was incredible, allowing for a level of environmental destruction hardly seen in games prior, and definitely not seen to this level in the FPS genre, not on console, not even on PC. It was one of those features that was genuinely exciting and new, a peek into the bold future of video games as we saw it in 2001. The FPS worlds we'd been playing so far were often static and unmoving, destruction limited to set-piece moments or the odd toilet, mirror, or red barrel. But what if you could talk to the monsters? No, wait, wrong question. What if you could blow up that wall instead of opening the door? The possibilities were endless. This would reinvent what it meant for freedom and experimentation in shooters, and for games as a whole. Day Zero was approaching for video games, and it would all be thanks to Red Faction, the little PS2 FPS that could. Except it was the little PS2 FPS that couldn't a lot of the time. Sony's machine wasn't exactly overflowing with processing power. It was no slouch in 2001, sure, but it couldn't compete with the top-spec PCs of the day. So a bold new physics-based destruction engine was already being built for a device that wasn't exactly bleeding-edge hyper-future tech. That was limiting factor number one. Despite this, Volition was still able to get a version of Geo-Mod up and running for the PS2 that allowed for significant amounts of destruction and would see levels able to be approached in countless different ways, depending on what direction you aimed your blasting caps in. Of course, this meant you could also circumvent large parts of any level. Plus, it meant you were far more likely to find yourself completely stuck or breaking the game in some other way. So a conscious decision was made to rein in how much geomodding could be done. That was limiting factor number two. Then there was the fact that, even with the decision to limit how free players could be with their exploderizing, Volition was still working to the design mantra of, we are doing Geo-Mod regardless, and Geo-Mod will drive the game regardless. It might not sound like it, but that was actually limiting factor number three, and that was according to the actual creator of the engine, John Slagel. That was very hard to do, Slagel said of the design mantra. In my opinion, at the end of the project and with hindsight, I think that Geo-Mod is a great effect. Games that do not have it seem flat, and I think trying to make it drive gameplay was a noble goal. But in the end, had we done it over and said, we're doing Geo-Mod as an awesome effect, it does not need to drive gameplay, we would have had a much better game, series, engine. And who am I to argue with the guy who invented the thing, eh? What this all led to was a bold, new, exciting vision of what video games could and would be in this exciting future we all lived in back in 2001. That was neutered and underused in the finished game for reasons technical, design-based, and functionality-based. Of course, that all changed with other games, and Geo-Mod and its offshoots became the absolute standard of environmental destruction engines for all games that follow, and no, not really. Slagel explained the engine's low-level code was outdated by the time Red Faction released. It wasn't even optimized for 3D accelerators. It worked in Red Faction despite itself, basically. It was never going to go much further than being an in-house, also-ran gimmick of an engine. It was still incredible to blow a hole around doors to get through them, mind. They can never take that away from me. And it did lead to Red Faction Guerrilla, which might have moved away from the ability to destroy natural floors and walls and the like, but moved towards a genuinely superb blow-up-all-the-human-made shit approach, often with a hammer. God, what a game. It's another digression. So there it was. Early mid-2001, one of the PS2's first big, fully fleshed FPSs in the Half-Life sense of the genre. A good game on console, a game it was easy to miss on the PC. Solid ideas and a unique setting, but some surprisingly pedestrian design at times and a narrative that never quite seemed to get where it wanted to go. Oh, and a brand new and exciting physics engine that offered a peek at its incredible potential in the opening levels, but suddenly became relegated to a feature you sometimes would forget existed. Imperfect, but fun. A 2026 7 out of 10 for me, but a 2001 9. Because time, age, me being at home on PS2, it all contributes to making something that wasn't actually all that amazing in the grand scheme of things feel like it was much better, especially at the time. And at the time, people largely agreed with those sentiments. The quick glance at Metacritic and game ranking scores for Red Faction shows an 88% average from both on PS2. Beloved American publication EGM handed out an 8.67 out of 10. Other beloved terrible publication Game Informer offered both a 9 and a 9.25 out of 10. Both of those decimally placed scores should have been out of 1,000, but hey. World's greatest PlayStation magazine, Play, in the UK, not the US one, threw a lot of percents Volition's way, 94 of them to be precise. Full disclosure as a reminder, I wrote for Play from 2009 through 2012 full-time, and years more as a freelancer, so naturally I'm corrupt and untrustworthy. It wasn't all roses and lollipops. Edge in the UK offered a typically joyless 5 out of 10 to Red Faction, though weirdly in a review I think I broadly agree with. Poor AI, mediocre level design, and underwhelming narrative, and the failure to fully exploit the engine's real-time deformation capability conspire to produce what can only be described as an average experience, the Fun Police wrote. And the only disagreement I have there is that the Crimson Gang's revolutionary adventures it never was average. It was always a good game, just one with rough edges that Edge refused to look past. Also, they wrote one player as a single word, and yet people still hold on to the notion of Edge as a bastion of good games writing. Psst. Away from my petty squabbles with inanimate objects like magazines, reviews also did a good job of highlighting what I took a while to say earlier. The reception Red Faction received on PS2 was far more welcoming and positive, Edge aside, than the one it saw on PC. The PC being riddled with gout from the richest of FPS cuisine it had been gorging on for years by 2001, as it was. GameSpot awarded the PS2 version 8.8 out of 10 in a review that mentioned 11 different games, at least if you count Quake series and Quake 3 as different games, and probably 20 plus mentions of games if you count the repeats, plus 3 films mentioned and 1 novel. Look, I know comparison is important to get the gist across to people, but it's also important to talk about what you're talking about, not everything else apart from what you're talking about, you know? And that score should have been out of 100, but hey. Sorry, old editor habits. GameSpot, an 8.8 on PS2. On PC, 7.9. Game Planner, 4.5 out of 5 on PS2, should have been out of 10, and a 3 out of 5 on PC. Eurogamer was probably the best example, with the same reviewer on the same site in the same year giving the same game 9 out of 10 on Sony's console, but 7 out of 10 on PC. And to reiterate here, he was right to do that. Regardless, on balance, Red Faction was very well received on PS2, and well enough received on PC, fair to say, ultimately hitting around 1.6 million sales worldwide on console, give or take a couple 100,000. THQ, now dead, then publisher of the game, likely brought in around $50 million from the Martian miners' revolution. It's what Marx would have wanted. So sure, it was never quite in that special realm with the likes of Valve's Freeman 'em Up, that first Halo, or the more cerebral types like Deus Ex, but Red Faction was praised and shifted copies, and it's no surprise it spawned sequels. It's something I'd need to do individual videos on them for, but let's have some potted takes on Red Faction's 3 core sequels. The second game, Red Faction 2, cunningly, featured both Jason Statham and Lance Henriksen in prominent voice acting roles, a big tick in Bransfield's book. The anti-ticks, though, came from the fact it was A, set on Earth, and 2, really very bland. As Jeffrey Smith, artist on the first 2 factions, said, unfortunately we soon found out that the success of Red Faction ended up ruining the creative environment of the sequel. That was true of the 4th game, Red Faction Armageddon, as well. A game you could almost literally smell the corporate interference in. From the, hey, why not aliens storyline to the almost complete lack of red in the colour scheme, on a game set on Mars with red in the title, to the Nanoforge, a gun capable of repairing the structural destruction you may have wrought on an area. It was good from a functionality perspective, but the Rebuilder canon absolutely smacked of someone in a meeting one day saying, hey, I find a lot of these suggestions start with hey. Hey, some people get stuck or destroy staircases and things they don't mean to, we shouldn't let that happen because consequences are too hard to deal with and we don't want complaints. My beloved Play put it best, branding the fourth game with a 62% score and surmising, Armageddon misses the point of why people loved Guerrilla by such a phenomenal margin it's genuinely difficult to understand. It's not a terrible game. It's just bland, boring, and loses the vast majority of factors that made the last game so worth playing. I mean, yes, I did write that for the mag back in 2011, but it is still accurate. Eagerly-eared viewers will note I skipped number 3 there, and that's because I do actually want to do a video on Red Faction Guerrilla at some point in my life, so I'm hesitant to start talking about it here lest I never stop. It was a third-person open-world game of chaotic destruction and, to me, incredible atmosphere, probably because of Mars's surface being terraformed, wahey! Guerrilla featured significantly improved Geo-Mod destruction, of human-made structures at least, as I mentioned, a story that had progressed with the first game very much in mind, placing the original's liberating force of the EDF as the oppressive regime you now had to fight against, and, well, the ostrich hammer. Look, adore is a strong word, and Red Faction Guerrilla had more than its fair share of issues and outright failings, but I do adore it. Sadly, the world functioned in chronological order, so the third game was not the final of the Red Factions, the fourth was, and the fourth was ass. And so the series was laid to rest. There was a new game being worked on under the watchful eye of current franchise owners and savvy business experts at Embracer Group, but that was cancelled. And so here I am, 25 years after the first game's release and 15 years after I wrote the feature about the series being dead, saying with no shortage of sadness in my heart, Dead Faction. That was the title of the feature in case you missed it, though it wasn't my original pitch. Remember, this was a feature about the death of the Red Faction series, right? Yeah? Got it? And so, I wanted to go with Hammer Time Stop. It is funny and good, and I will accept no notes. But to leave it on a downer, as you always should, artist on the first two factions Josh Nizzi told me this, speaking about the period shortly after the original game launched and saw its immediate success. I remember an email from Volition's founder Mike Koulas to the team saying something like, "For all of you guys that are new to game development, it's not normally this great." And that was true, unfortunately. RIP in peace, Volition. Thanks for watching, an extra smashing thanks to my patrons on Patreon, and as I record this, my one YouTube member. Wow, I have to stop making jokes about there being nobody on that now. Huh. You can ruin my japery more by following the links at the end of the video or below and supporting me way more than I deserve. I'm off to foment an uprising. Bye!